Welcome to Business Insight. I'm Peter Marks, and my guest is Richard Hanna, Assistant Professor from Babson College. Rich, pleasure to have you with us.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Aside from Babson, Rich is co-author of the book Email Marketing in a Digital World, and we're going to be talking about some of those issues today. So, Rich, why don't we start out, why did you write this book?
Well, I've been fascinated by email for a long time, which may make me a little geeky. But when I was first studying, going back to school, the internet boom was around us. And I first became interested in email as I noticed companies were sending a variety of email types and also sending multiple offers, but using different email addresses. And since then, I've studied email and been fascinated by the way companies use it. And this is one of those things where I just finally wanted to review it in detail and put something in writing about it.
Who are you addressing? In other words, who would be the target audience for the book?
I think the target audience for this book is small to medium-sized business, people who are just getting into using email and feel they need to be using email but are not quite sure how to get into it. It also is great for the classroom if you're talking about email and want to illustrate how should it be used and what are the different considerations companies need to think about. I think it's a good instructional book for that as well.
Now, email's been around for a long time. We're now bombarded by all these social media, Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. How does email fit in this social media world?
Well, that's a great question. I think email is as important as ever. Some people have claimed because of social media, email is dying. But email is not going away. In fact, it's the primary tool for people to communicate with each other. And if you ask people, they're more interested in hearing from companies via email than through any other type of media. I think the real issue today, though, that companies need to think about is how are they using email, because in some of its overuse, it's becoming akin to junk mail, and people are tuning it out more than they probably used to. And I think that's a big issue, and another motivation for my wanting to write this book is really to say, are we using email correctly?
And what are some of the benefits that you think people get from using email?
Well, a key benefit from the company perspective is you have an opportunity for one-to-one communication, and it's more personal. When you're using social media, you're really talking to a broad group, whereas with email, you can still communicate on a one-to-one basis. It also has a high return rate in terms of its effectiveness. It can be even more effective if used properly. From an interpersonal perspective, person to person, it's a way of writing a longer letter that you couldn't do in a text message. And it's a way of keeping a record of that message as well.
And what would you say, what are the fundamentals of succeeding in email marketing?
Well, I think there's the easiest thing that people can attack or can address would be things like the subject line, the use of graphics, and consideration of what device people are reading the email on. For example, today most people read emails from their phone, but if a person's not careful and they design the email to be read on a desktop, it's not going to look correctly. So a lot of the easy things to handle are formatting issues. But I think a bigger issue, which is actually harder to address, is when to email. And that's probably a bigger issue because I think a lot of companies email too frequently. And as a result, people start to ignore those emails and they become less effective. So one thing is to really think about who you're emailing and why are you emailing, and are you potentially emailing too often?
Let's go for a second through the key elements. Your name, or your company, what kind of thinking goes into what you're going to put in that from box?
Well, so I'm not sure. In that case, there's some laws that govern that. So there's the spam laws that dictate the name, or the from has to be clear. It has to be clear who's the sender. You can't hide or disguise who the sender is. So it's critical that there's honesty there. There's other issues also that spam laws require, such as having the date, having a subject line that is relevant to what's in the email, and not having a fake or a subject line just to grab your attention, and then having different information in the actual email. And then every email also has to have an ability for people to unsubscribe. And there's a few other things that all those are governed by law. Now, moving beyond that, in terms of human nature, to have an email that's effective, you want a subject line that a person can relate to. So if you know that you have customers and they like sales, then pointing out that you're having a sale is very important. But certain words can be overdone, and certain things like exclamation marks and other punctuation can actually cause the email to be picked up by a spam filter, and person never actually sees the email at all.
Is there a too long or too short in terms of the subject line?
Oh, definitely. There's definitely too long. You want to be able to read it, especially as people are reading emails on a cell phone or a smartphone. It needs to be short enough that the person can see all the relevant information. But what's too short versus what's too long, the beauty of email and the beauty of digital is that you can experiment, because what might be correct for one company or one industry may not be the same for another. So companies have to experiment and find out what works best for them. But generally, shorter is always better than longer, just not too short.
Any other ways to figure? We all kind of struggle, not just with email marketing, but right, every day you're sending out emails, and where you want people to pay attention and so forth. Any thinking that you do is you kind of put that subject line there.
Well, I think, the old rule, the golden rule, keep it simple. Keeping it simple, get your point right away so that people know what it's about, what's relevant. Today, people are not going to spend a lot of time reading into details, so I think not only should the subject line be direct, but even the content of the email can't be too long, or people won't continue to read the entire thing.
Back to marketing. Who do you send it to, and how do you create a list of people you want to send it to?
Well, if you're generating a list from scratch, the easiest way is to start with your customers. And so with your existing customer base, you want to gather information, and you can do that either through, if you're a retail store, through the interaction at the point of the cash register. You can collect an email address. But let's come back to that one, because people these days don't want to give away their email address very easily, because they know they're opening themselves up to a lot of email. But other ways is through your website. Anytime you're exchanging information or providing something to a customer, you can get their email address. For example, some websites in the consumer business, consumer retail, will offer a coupon for providing an email address. In the B2B world, you can provide a white paper or something that a person can download that is of value to them. In exchange, they have to give their email address. So that's one of the ways. But any transaction or interaction you have is an opportunity to gather an email address. It just has to be, you have to give something of value in exchange for that.
How do you measure how you're doing with an email campaign?
Well, there are lots of metrics. That's the beauty of emails. It's easily measurable. There's a variety of metrics that are used, such as open rate and click-through rate. I think the more important is the click-through rate, because that tells you how many people decided upon looking at the email they wanted to actually follow up and get more information. The problem with open rates these days is that they can be deceiving, in that a person might just quickly browse an email and it's registered as open, but they didn't actually read the information that's in it. So looking at the click-through rate, and then another way to look at it is also how many people unsubscribe or stop reading your emails as a result of a particular campaign. You want to keep that churn as low as possible, and if you find that upon each campaign your unsubscribe rate is going up, then you have to start thinking about, are you perhaps campaigning too often or sending too many emails?
Unsubscribe. I always worry if I don't really know it's a big company. Click unsubscribe, then all of a sudden they know I'm real, and it may make me more likely to get more emails.
That is a legitimate fear. My personal advice is, if you know the company, if it's a well-known retailer or a well-known company that you're doing business with, you can unsubscribe confidently that your email is not going to be passed on to someone else. But if it is what we would call spam or junk mail, and you don't know how they got your email address, just delete it. Try to avoid, in fact, even triggering the open on it, and delete it, or put it, assign it to a filter so it automatically goes into a junk mail box. Because you're right, once you click on unsubscribe, they realize there's a pulse behind that email address, and your name will just be shifted to another list.
Tell us a little about the world of spam these days.
Well, unfortunately, the world of spam hasn't changed much. One of the issues with the spam laws is it does nothing to prevent companies from sending you an email. So your email can be acquired in any number of ways, and there's no law that says that a company or an individual can't email another email address. The things that are in there to try to protect us are, for example, certain servers might prevent a sender from sending out bulk emails if it's not appropriate. Also, by the spam laws, you have the right to unsubscribe. But as we just talked about, that may not do much. So really, not much has changed since spam was first created. And if anything, I think more people are viewing maybe even legitimate emails as spam as they get too many. I was just clearing out my email box, and I was on vacation for 2 days, and in a matter of 2 days, my email box generated over 300 emails.
Wow.
And more than 3/4 are not business related, and not from my friends either.
Is the quantity of spam more now than, say, 5 years ago?
I'm not sure if it's more now. I haven't looked at any research to record how much is there that's spam, but I do know that more and more companies have to be careful of how much email they're sending out, because people may not be making the distinction between what's spam and just simply their email box being overfilled with things that they don't care about.
Now, there are companies like Constant Contact that can be helpful to one when they do it. Can you tell us a little about how these work and how they can be helpful?
Well, they can be very helpful because, as we mentioned earlier, one of the key issues is formatting. And today, where people use Macs versus PCs, Android phones versus iPhones, there's all these different formats. Also, whether you're reading your email on a web browser versus Outlook or another type of software, emails will render or appear differently. And so companies like Constant Contact and MailChimp can help with the formatting side. They also help especially for a company or a small business that doesn't have the resources to do the graphics and to create an email that is technically appropriate. They provide all of the software and all the ability for a person to create professional-looking emails and manage an email list, so they know when they sent an email to a particular person on the list. They can track how frequently, and it also tracks all the metrics in terms of whether the email was opened, click-through rates, and all the other important metrics for an email campaign.
So like you were saying before, in terms of measuring your success,
yes,
it's a lot easier if you got somebody like that.
Absolutely.
Kind of to package it. And my impression is they're pretty simple to use.
Very simple to use. They're cost-effective, and if you want to send out bulk emails, it's probably the best way to go.
How would you say 5 or 10 years from now, what is the world of email marketing going to look like?
Well, I'd like to think that 5 to 10 years from now, we would do a better job of marrying data about the customer with the emails we send out. Right now, for a lot of companies, the customer information lives on one database or computer resource, and the marketing side of it, of sending information out, lives somewhere else, and the two don't get together. And as a result, it becomes cheaper to just bulk email everyone. And given the return on emails, there's really no value right now for some companies to be very careful about who they're sending emails to. It's like the old sales model. You make 10,000 calls to get 100 leads and hopefully get one sale. Given the millions of email addresses that are out there, you can afford to send out lots of them. So I think 5 to 10 years from now, I'd like to see companies doing a better job of using customer data to send the right email at the right time that's most relevant, as opposed to flooding our email boxes. And I think we're going to have to get there, or risk the email becoming the equivalent of the postcard that we're getting in the mail that instantly gets dumped into the recycle bin.
And how about the spammers? Where are they going to be in 5 or 10 years?
I think unless we have a better way of filtering, they're probably going to be in the same place, because they wouldn't do it if it didn't lead to some kind of return.
It's a cheap way for them to market.
Exactly.
Fascinating. Well, we're about out of time. I'd like to thank our guest, Rich Hanna, professor from Babson College and also co-author of Email Marketing in the Digital World, for Business Insight. Thanks for joining us.